This is the Flywheel Economics podcast, where we explore principles that seek to redefine the way we think about economies. I'm your host, Richard O.
And I'm Favor Gbadu. It's really great to be here co-hosting this podcast. We explore economies as ecosystems and look at new ways of viewing economic policymaking, innovation, and investment.
Well, today, Favor, is our first episode, and I'm really pleased with this one. And I thought what would be really good is if we could introduce the concept of flywheel economics and the flywheel economy. So are you up for that?
Yeah, I'm so excited. I can't wait for our listeners to get a look at what flywheel economics exactly means. And I'm sure they'll be excited to come on this journey with us.
I hope so. We'll be taking a deep dive into the foundational principles that make up what the flywheel economy is. So let's get going.
I'm really excited. So I have questions for you, Richard. Obviously, you are the expert, the most knowledgeable about this. So my first question is going to be, what is flywheel economics? For listeners who are just interacting with us for the very first time, what does flywheel economics really mean?
Okay, well, like any classic essay response, let's start by defining what a flywheel is, in case those listening don't know. So a flywheel is a large wheel which takes some effort to get going. So you need a bit of initial effort, but once that wheel is going, it's quite easy then to sustain the momentum. So you often find this in cars. A car will often have a flywheel, which will be there to help regulate the energy that's released from stored from the engine and then released when it's needed. You can also find it in other things, right? So businesses, for example, they talk about the flywheel effect. You can see that in examples like with Uber. When Uber was setting up their business, they got to a stage where they knew they needed to have customers. They need to have plenty of customers in order to sustain their operations. But in order to get customers, they needed to have taxis or Ubers that were available to their customers at any point in time. So if there are not many Ubers around, customers wouldn't come to the platform. So there was an initial effort that they needed to do to make sure that there were plenty of Ubers that were available for their customers to use. And that meant they had to run at a loss initially and just really take a lot of effort to go to scale. So they would pay their Uber drivers to be in key locations that they would be available for their customers to use. Until eventually it became really convenient for customers. And then customers started using it naturally. And there were enough customers then on the platform to sustain the number of Uber drivers that were out there. And it could get into this flywheel effect where the business was able to grow and grow and grow. So in businesses, you have a flywheel effect as well. Initial effort that then leads to a sustained momentum. And it's not just businesses that have a flywheel effect. We find it also in nature, where you can have these sustainable ecosystems that actually have self-supporting elements, right? So you can have fruit production, which is going on in an area, or some sort of crop production, and there are elements in that ecosystem that's supporting that and protecting that from pests and other attacks. And when it gets to a critical mass of biodiversity within that area, self-supporting parts of the ecosystem, that ecosystem can maintain. And so that's what we're really looking at with flywheel economics, is we're looking to try and get our economies into a position where, with a little bit of initial effort, we can get into these very positive, self-sustaining momentum of growth, livelihoods, and do so in a sustainable way. So something that's going to last long and not going to be degrading the environment or impacting on the climate and on planet, but doing it in a way which is genuinely sustainable and, helps to change lives. And so that's what we're really looking for. And I think with flywheel economics and the flywheel economy, we're really going to be trying to find those examples that are out there of where we have seen those flywheel effects happening, where that momentum has happened. And we're going to try and ask ourselves, Favor, the difficult or the interesting question, I should say, how did that happen? Why did it happen? And when we start to understand how it happened and why it happens, we can take the lessons from that and apply it elsewhere.
Well, thank you so much. I love the way you broke everything down. And it's so cool to see that our world is so intricately connected, how you can take an example from nature and then make it make sense to our economy. So, and from everything you were saying, I could really hear the passion in your voice, and that's so cool. So everyone loves a good backstory, right? That's why we watch YouTube clips on how did they meet. So in this case, how did Richard decide to start Flywheel Economics? Can you just walk us through that?
Okay, well, I'll ask you more about your YouTube videos later. Yeah, so how it started. I've been an economist my career. I've worked for governments. I've worked for intergovernmental organizations, and one of the things which I've seen over time is that policymakers, economic policymakers, really struggle to see their economies as ecosystems. They like to see it as something which is very sort of linear, very controlled, something where they can say, we want to build perhaps a cement production factory here, or we want an automobile industry. They see it very much as sort of standalone. And that's a very dangerous approach to take, because economies, in my experience, behave much more like natural ecosystems. And it's something which is not completely within anyone's design or control. And actually, the risk is when you try and over design something, you end up doing more harm than good, or the ecosystem has a way of pushing back and doing it in a different way. So what motivated me to get behind Flywheel Economics is seeing lots of examples of bad economic policies that take place and that don't work and don't have the intended impact that they're required, but also seeing some really strong examples of policies that work really well, and trying to understand what enabled them to work well. And I think, as a person, I got to, as many of us did during the COVID pandemic time, getting out into the garden was one of the few places you could go out to, right? And so I started growing things like many other people did. I started spending more time with nature, started to see how those ecosystems manage. I had a nice lemon tree outside in my garden in Islamabad in Pakistan, where I was living at the time. You see this big caterpillar on the leaf, which was enjoying eating that leaf of my lemon tree. And I was outraged seeing this caterpillar there. But I wasn't sort of, I was in a sort of peaceful moment. I wasn't really outraged. I was just sort of observing, looking at it. And then suddenly this big hornet, which I'd always seen hornets as a threat, like something to, oh my God, this is going to sting me. This is going to be. I was just sort of quietly there, just watching, swoop down and pick up the caterpillar and fly off with it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't need to do anything. I didn't need to sort of spray any chemicals on the plants. I didn't need to do anything, but nature had a way of taking care of it. So the caterpillar had eaten some of its food from the leaf. The hornet had swooped in and carried the caterpillar away for its own meal. And actually, that hornet was a really important part of the ecosystem that was there. Something which I'd just seen as being a threat was actually serving a really useful purpose in a balanced ecosystem. And I think the more time I spent with nature, the more I saw those parallels as a sort of metaphor for how we're doing our economic policy making and how we need to look at our economies. So we're not trying to engineer, we're not trying to be architects. What we're trying to do instead is to be a gardener through the economic policy side. We're trying to look at what's working, what's good, what kind of plants and fruits and crops that we want to be growing in our ecosystem, and we want to be finding ways to make a very conducive ecosystem for those for what it is we're trying to achieve. And we're not just trying to do things in an unnatural way, favor, right? So there's no point if I live in the very wet and cold United Kingdom, if I'm trying to grow a lemon tree there, I'm going to have problems. It's not the right climate, it's not the right conditions, and so I've got to have a think about what are going to be the appropriate things for the conditions that I'm in. And I think likewise with our economies as well. You've got to see what's organically growing and what could potentially grow over time. We don't have to be stuck in with what we've got growing, but we do have to look at what we could potentially grow in the environment that we have. And when we do that, we start making better decisions, better economic decisions as well from doing that. So that's really my motivation. And I believe it's probably the most powerful way we can look at economic policy making going forward.
Oh, that is such an inspiring story. And I did read your original article on LinkedIn about the whole lemon tree incident. And to me, it was an eye-opening. Like, I didn't see life or economics like that at all. It turns out that, as I said earlier, everything is intricately connected, and it's such an inspiring story. And I'm sure everyone listening will think that same way. And just to put it into words, I know you have already talked about your motivation and everything that Flywheel Economics is set to do. But just put it into words. What would you say are the key things you are hoping to accomplish with Flywheel Economics, or that you hope Flywheel Economics accomplishes?
Yeah, so I think with Flywheel Economics, saying it's a philosophy, I think is too strong. But what it is certainly an approach. When I went through my economics training at university, there's a very well established way that you are taught economics, and I'm not here to disagree with that. I'm not here to sort of say it's all rubbish and I've got a much better way. But where I think it perhaps has its limitations is that it's inevitably trying to simplify our frameworks for understanding, which of course we need to do. That's what basic models are, as simplifications. It helps us to understand. But at some point we have to take a step back and see that there is so much interconnectedness between the different parts of our economy, whether that's firms, labor, land, capital, or all of that. There's so much interconnectedness that we have to start, I guess, having that sort of wider view and being a bit of a steward towards it. And I think when we can start having that approach, it stops us from making some of the mistakes that many countries have gone down in the past, which have kept them locked in, whether it's poverty or low growth or all the rest of it. It's really about trying to just have that approach that I hope many more economists and policymakers can start having towards their economies, because it will be more sustainable, it will be more impactful. This is really where I think we can make a difference as Flywheel Economics.
Yeah, I love what you said, talking about the fact that when you were in school, you were taught the theories, and definitely those theories are still valid. It's just that out in practice, you get to see how they really interact. And maybe that's another thing that Flywheel Economics is definitely going to bring, another angle. The fact that you have been in practice, you have seen how these different players within an economic ecosystem interact, and now we are working towards ensuring that, okay, how can we do this better? As you said, create a change, do better, so that the things that hold different nations hostage, poverty and the rest, we can find a way to sustainably come out of them. So I'm really excited, and I know everyone listening is as well. So what should our listeners and our wider audience expect from Flywheel Economics in the nearest future?
Yeah, so I think it's one thing to have the flywheel. Hopefully through this episode, I've been able to at least set out what, from the concept side of things, the flywheel economy is. Right, we try and emulate that flywheel and what we're doing. We want to get initial effort that leads to sustained momentum, right? And hopefully that concept starts becoming clearer. But what does that mean in practice? And I think this is the journey, Faber, that you and I, and hopefully our listeners, will go on over the next few years, is trying to really start bringing out what is the toolkit for that? What are the lessons learned? And to do that, we have to start understanding practical examples, right? So whether that's the tech cluster in Yaba, Lagos, how did that get going? What was the initial effort? And how did that lead to sort of sustained positive momentum that led to such a wonderful outcome in that part of Lagos? Or whether it's the sports producing part of Pakistan in Sialkot, where an airport was built in order to help them export to markets across the world. How did that happen? I think the more we can start unpacking these stories and getting the lessons learned, the more we can have these practical tools which can be used to, I won't say replicate, but at least the approaches can be replicated. And where governments come in, where businesses come in, where different stakeholders in that ecosystem come in, we can look at what good practices happen that could be copied elsewhere, which can then lead to really good things happening. So that's what I hope we're able to achieve over the coming few years. And I'm really excited because I know we've got lots of good material. And some of it's going to be about good examples. But unfortunately, I think we also have things that we can, there are bad examples of where policies go the opposite way. And I think we can also learn some really valuable lessons from that as well. So it's not going to just be all wonderful success stories. It's also going to be looking at things where policies go wrong and trying to understand the lessons from that. We'll try and keep it nicely balanced between the two. And yeah, hopefully by by the time we've been doing this for a while, Favor, we'll have a really well developed toolkit for practitioners out there of what flywheel economics, what the flywheel economy is, and how to start putting that into practice.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited, especially about the fact that we're going to be using a lot of real life case studies, real countries, and real policies and real people. It's really exciting because I think that's one thing that really sounds with human beings, the fact that their stories. So that's one approach that I love that Flywheel Economics is going to do. Just like the way you gave the Uber example, I feel like it's really painted the picture, made us understand, okay, what this concept is about. And so I'm really excited about all the case studies. And as you said, our listeners, they are in for a treat, an economic defining treat. Yeah. So now, do we just share with us final thoughts basically on Flywheel Economics, and just kind of help us get more to anticipate more what's set to come. So just share with us final thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. So I think to keep it at its most simple, right, with flywheel economics, it's treating economies as ecosystems, and that's what I want anyone who's listening to this episode to remember about flywheel economics: economies as ecosystems. But it's not just enough to understand it as an ecosystem. The so what of all of this is, so what does that mean? If I start treating my economy as an ecosystem, what does that mean? And of course, we all want better lives for the people in our country. We all want better lives. We know with climate change, we know with environmental degradation that's going on right now, that some of the approaches we've had over the past few hundred years have not been sustainable. And I think there's a real opportunity now to redefine how we go about things, both for the livelihoods of people in our countries across the world, but also in terms of doing economic growth a bit differently and having it more sustainable, more regenerative. And I think the flywheel principles covers both and covers it in a very powerful way. So I'm really looking forward to getting going with all of this. And I hope that our listeners, I hope that our audience will also enjoy being on this journey with us, Favor. And I'm just keen to get started. And I think hopefully our first episode should be one which will be close to home for you, Favor. Do you want to give a bit of a insight into that episode?
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's the Yaba Tech Cluster story, how it all got started and where it is today. Trust me, it's a story of great determination and also a little bit of luck, funny enough. But yet, it's perfectly portrays flywheel economics, and I think it's such a good case study for us.
Yeah, and I think we'll try and mix it up a bit, Favor, with this podcast. So we're going to do some in-depth special episodes, which are going to be looking at the case studies, and they may be a bit longer. But I think also, Favor, we'll have some episodes which will be more conversational between you and myself. It will be a bit more, perhaps bringing more interactive elements from the audience in there as well. So we'll try and keep a bit of a balance in this podcast series, to just to, I guess, keep the have the space for the depth and the case studies, but also have space for engagement, also have space for other people's ideas as well around this, because I don't think for any 1 second that we will be the only ones who will have insight into this. And I'm sure there are many more examples of the kind of flywheel effects in economies around the world that other people have witnessed. And I'm really keen that people are able to share that with us, share those lessons as well, so we can really enrich the toolkits that will come out of all of this.
That's right. So really looking forward to mixing things up. After all, this is us talking about economies as ecosystems. And what do ecosystems do best? They rely on one another. And so we're not just going to be the ones talking or our case studies. We're really going to be leaning on our audience to take a look at their own expertise as well. And so I'm really excited. It's going to be a fun journey. Don't you think so as well, Richard?
Absolutely. I think you summed it up perfectly there, Favor. So, if we're going to be gardeners in how we approach the economy, then we should be gardeners in how we approach this podcast and look at the ecosystem which is there and hopefully learn from it. So I really hope people join our ecosystem and that we can be part of that, sort of get that flywheel effect going with our podcast as well, and really learn the lessons from each other.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's going to be a lot of informative content, but also really fun. That is one aspect that I'm really looking forward to, the fact that it's going to be amazing fun. So thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for taking our time to really explain the flywheel economics. And I'm sure everyone that's listening to this podcast is excited about this journey with us. So thank you so much. And thank you very much to all our listeners. We're really happy to be here finally in the public space, and just can't wait for you to join us on this exciting journey. And we don't want to let it go. We're not just a podcast. You can continue to be part of this journey by joining us on our social media pages. We're on X, we're on Instagram, and we're on Facebook. You can also connect with us on our website at flywheeleconomics.com. There you get to find more content and just engage with us on a broader scene.
All right. So thank you, Favor, and thank you to the listeners. Let's get into our first case study. So tune in for that one soon.
Yes. See you on next episode. Thank you very much. This has been the Flywheel Economics podcast.